Welcome to Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today I have with me Tarnell Davis. Tarnell, what's happening with you?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm all right, man. I'm not an Elgin anymore. You holding it down while I'm down here in the Carolinas. So I kind of appreciate that. Actually, one of the things that I want to start off in our conversation is, do you remember, like, how did we connect? Sometimes I like to ask some of my guests that.
So the original way was through Facebook, and it was through Kim Shaw. And she was promoting your book, and I ended up buying your book, Stillwater's The Porch Book.
Oh, word? Okay. All right.
Yep,
That is
I got that.
Because I remember Kim was like, you two should meet. She was like, she saw a similar drive, a similar like something, and she was like, you two should connect. So yeah, it was always through this entity, this virtual entity. So I mean, next time I'm home, man, we got to actually like shake hands and dap because we've never actually met face to face, I don't think. But we travel in some of the same circles. Like I started following you on your YouTube channel, right? And
Yep.
I saw one of the first pictures I saw up was my guy Jaren. That's my dude right there.
Yep.
So that's cool. We'll get a chance to kind of get into that later because talking about basketball leads right into why I have you on the show. I see you executing something in a way that's unique to you that in my latest book I call genius. So that being said, Tarnell, my question to you is, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
From what we're looking at now, I consider myself in that realm. Just for genius means also not just the intellect, but at the same time that you're able to push forward something that hasn't been seen. But it's not the point that it hasn't been thought about by somebody. It just hasn't been able to be articulated properly and pushed properly by people, depending upon what their actual thought was and if they went far enough to just write something down. One of my things in my mind is I just need to write it down just so I can see it again. The thought was there, but I need to see it again. Not to overthink it, but to actually attack the situation so that way I can make it something that's tangible.
Exactly. Now you use the word it's more than just talking about it. You have to actually begin to execute it properly. And
Correct.
the proper execution that makes it genius is all about you, though, because somebody else may execute something similarly, but they're not going to execute it the way you would. Your individuality, the thing that makes Tarnell, is actually what comprises your genius. And so I want to back up though, because what you said, your answer, there was two things that I heard in your answer that let me know that you recently had a change of thought or you repented in how you were thinking. You was like, hey, he said, you were like, in this context, I'm paraphrasing, you're like, in this context, yeah. So that does that have to do with the fact that you had watched a previous video and kind of heard me unpack this genius before and was like, oh, okay, I guess that is a different way to think about it.
So when I originally did an interview, it was with Phil Wallace, and we were just spitballing things back and forth on how to move. Coach is always going to do the coach talk stuff. So we knew how to do that. But once I started actually writing it down and just, formulating other questions and bouncing questions off of parents per se, more or less than anybody else, because the kids are going to come to them, and that's kind of where things ended up going. I'm just kind of like, well, what's the best course of action here so that way everybody can understand under the same umbrella what makes sense. And that's what led me to start writing things down so that way I could execute, like you were just saying.
How long ago was that?
So the first interview I did with Phil was around January. So that came into play because I wanted to wait a little bit after I went and did another one, just so I could see if it made sense to how to move. And I just didn't want to have a whole bunch of content and we were doing repetitive questions.
Right.
So that ended up hitting me around the end of February.
Okay. All right. So this is
I knew how to, and then I knew how to, okay, now I know how to do this. Yeah. And then it was like, okay, how do I get the other entities in place so that we can all learn something from it? Because I'm learning from everybody that I speak to, same as you.
Exactly. That's a fact, man. Every time there's been so much that I've picked up on doing this individual. I've been doing this for almost a year. These one-on-one interviews, typically I do them in workshops with it, where it's a bunch of youth or adults or whatever, but doing this one-on-one allows for the person to really engage and really add on some elements that I'm like, that's good, and pick that up and then refine that message even more. One thing that I heard you say too, the other thing rather, is that you were like, genius is not just intellect. And that's the main message that I want to come across with today, because more people don't consider themselves to be genius because they're thinking, well, my GPA and my IQ isn't X, Y, and Z. And that's, not to take away from somebody that has a high IQ. That's just one type of genius, though. And we have to stop, as a people, stop discounting ourselves because we had this pre-existing definition of what genius is. And most of the time that definition does not include us. Like, we can recognize it as somebody else real fast, like, oh, that person's a genius, but we never turn around and self-affirm. And there's a need to do that if we're going to recognize that we have something to contribute to society. And I see you contributing to society. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew, like, what you're doing is your genius. All right.
Yep. Well, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem, man. So my follow-up question for you is this. Who comes to mind? What name or what face comes to mind when you hear that word genius, though?
When I hear that word genius, one of the people I used to religiously follow, just a hip hop community, was always Talib Kweli. And I always liked the way the man moved.
Yes, sir.
And it's not from the fact that, okay, he have $100 million. No, but he moves in his own space. He's going to do what he wants to do because he's afforded himself the time that he put in way back when, all the way to now, to get himself to a point where he can go and display his thoughts, his views to a market that wants to listen to what he has to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I always looked at people like that because I'm like, you know what, that's right. That was right. That was right. And it was just more than the rap lyrics. Yeah, the rap lyrics brought me in. Because I was like, you know what, I don't want to listen to, the rah-rah all the time. Give me something to think about.
Yes, sir.
And him and Most back in the day, they gave me something to think about. And I was a lyricist too. I watched all of that. Black Thought's my guy. I put him up to anybody. Anybody. I don't care who you put in this list. Like, yeah, he gonna get them. And they're gonna respect him when he show up. It's like they just give him his own aura. But that's within the community because it's not the mainstream thing. And it doesn't have to be the mainstream thing. It's mainstream to the people who rock with that genuinely.
See, I'm trying not to like turn this interview into something else entirely, because you just said Black Star and Most Def and Talib Kweli and Black Thought, and that's a whole vibe for me. That's who I rock with. So I'm gonna try to stay focused. You brought a smile to my face, so I appreciate that. Here's the dope thing though. Like, I appreciate that you identify somebody that you can identify with, because the issue that I see, especially with our people, I'm just going to keep it 100, especially with our people, is that we'll put that label on somebody that looks nothing like us and then wonder why we don't consider ourselves to be genius. Because the answer that I get most times is Albert Einstein. And there's nothing about Albert Einstein that you and I can identify with on a physical level, right? Both of us, we talking to Baldies, his hair was all over the place. Like, we look nothing like him. And so I started doing these one-on-one interviews. The people who said, yes, I am a genius, who was still in the minority, like, they were the most people don't see it in themselves. But those that did, when I asked them who they saw as genius, it was always somebody like that looked like them, a parent, a relative, somebody that was their own ethnicity. And so there's something very important about being able to first identify it and see it in someone that you can relate to, and then be like, well, shoot, if they can do it, then, or if they have this component, why can't I? Why shouldn't I?
Right. And that was the whole thing about, these coaches, these administrators and stuff like that, is these are the people interacting with these student athletes for the most part. And I know we'll get into, what I'm actually doing, but these are the people interacting with them. Why shouldn't you have a voice? You got a big voice. People are steadily coming through you. People are bringing your kids to train, mentor when a kid get out of line. I popped out of a high school or two just to get somebody back in line because they respect what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that stuff just has to happen. But if you're going to be, at the forefront of all of this stuff like that, you utilize that. So not saying that you can make yourself a bigger entity, but at the same time, so that way you can bring more people to your positivity, so that way you can affect change, not just by who is just right there in front of you, because we have a bigger voice. It's almost like we had not a demand situation, but we have something that, a lot of people want to hear. So if they want to hear it, and they want to hear it, but you just didn't think about how to articulate it yet, so that way it makes sense for other people to tune into you.
Yeah. And it
That's
becomes,
where I want to get stuff.
say that again, my fault.
No, that's just all I was saying is that's just where I wanted to get stuff, because like you said, we got plenty of geniuses walking around, but it's just not displayed.
It's not displayed. It's like this is latent. It's not active. Hasn't been activated. And so there is, I like that Albert Einstein's name comes up because it leads me to this quote that purportedly comes from him that really begins to unravel how a lot of people are thinking. So I'm gonna say this quote and you let me know if you've heard it before. All right. So Albert Einstein has this quote, right? And it goes like this. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid. So you're already shaking your head. So you've heard this before. Now, had you heard it? Where did you hear this before?
So I heard that, funny coach. He went on to say some other really colorful stuff.
Colorful stuff.
That's what we call it. But he used that with the fish one time. He used something with the elephant too. I'm gonna have to ask a former teammate about that. Like, what did he say about the elephant? But they were all things that I'm pretty sure one person in the group knows it, but it was just kind of like, all right, okay, you got us. Like, let's pay attention to what he talking about right now, because otherwise we'll go off the rails. But definitely, and people don't understand. You're judging it like we got an entire world. I mean, we got an entire universe. A star isn't judged in a comet's place. A comet is moving. That star is not.
That's what's up. So when you first heard that, how did you internalize it? How did you package it so that you could really make sure you understood what he was trying to convey? And what did it convey to you then?
It stopped me because I'm just kind of like, you know what? Why would I, put myself into a situation where I know for a fact that everything he's saying is completely true. And sometimes we find ourselves pushing against the grain in situations that are not for us.
Yeah.
Way that fish. I mean, there was a video, with the hurricane now, where there was a whole walrus, like, going down the street. And I'm just kind of like, wow.
Where?
Yeah. It's like a viral video. He's just going down the sidewalk. I'm like,
You out your element.
Yeah, definitely. Out of your element, out of place. Don't know how this is going to readily be fixed because the water receded.
Right.
Yep. So
that's I like that. See, so it's all about your element, right? Because anybody that you talk to on this planet knows that a fish belongs in water. And so who in their right mind is going to look at this fish and be like, you know what? I think this thing should be climbing a tree. Nobody should be thinking that. But there are some people out here who assess and try to make sense of the world around them by making definitions that suit them. And those definitions, oftentimes, we're talking about stereotypes right now, basically. The way people view other people and stereotype them is to make their world make sense. And sometimes it'll be to the detriment of that person. But the person has to understand that, hey, look, that you can define me how you want, but that doesn't mean that your definition should become my definition. Right? So how one person defines genius, or how many people even define genius to be IQ related, to be GPA related, does not mean that that's how it fits you. And if you take that on and it's not really how you should be thought of, it can literally put you in a position where you're a fish out of water. And what happens when a fish stays out of water for too long?
Can't breathe. You gotta sit there. You're struggling essentially for air, and eventually, the end is gonna come for you.
The end, you're gonna die. And we're not talking about a physical type of death here, but there is, to me, if you begin to walk out your life defined by what somebody else has said about you, and it's not who you are, that's a form of death to me. Until you begin to know what's your lane, what's my lane, what is my element, and how do I function and thrive? Because if you would have picked up, if somebody would have come along and literally see a fish trying to climb a tree and would have just put it in some water, you would see right away what that fish's genius is. Because that joker would take off, and I don't care if you're the best swimmer in the world, you're not going to be able to keep up with that fish once you put it in its element. And so that's what this is all about, trying to figure out and understand what individual elements are so that they can then realize their their own personal genius. And so that's what we're going to get into, and how we begin to talk about the elements are by three components that are outlined in my book, right? It's your passion, your talent, and your purpose. So I'm saying everybody has passion, everybody has talent, and everybody has a purpose. So that means that if you have these three components, then you have genius on the inside of you.
For sure.
Right? So let's get into this first passion, this first component right here, this passion piece. I have an interesting way to think about passion, just like how I'm coming at genius from a different angle. I come at passion from a different angle too. But I want to ask you, just like I asked you about genius, what words come to mind when you think of passion though?
The things that drive your why you want to get up and do this, why does it make sense, why maybe it doesn't make sense to others, but it makes sense to you. So that way, even if it doesn't make sense to another individual, they can at least respect what you're doing. So that way you can keep going forward and actually touch the individuals that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
So passion is just that energy. It's almost like, sometimes you hear a person has a battery in their back. It's your personal battery that you get up with, that you thought about this. You wanted to work at this. This is something you obviously have put some time and thought into. So if that's what's there, then you need to get up and utilize what you have, because we all have our own personal strengths and weaknesses. So that way we can get better utilizing this battery that we have behind us that's pushing us. That's just our energy.
Absolutely. So you said a couple things. You said drive, push forward, and then battery. So I had another person say it's like the gas in your tank, right? Once you put the gas in your tank, you either gonna go up or you're gonna go forward. And that's what passion really is. But I want to explain it in an even more unique way. When I do this workshop with youth, eventually somebody will say, well, I think of love when I think of passion. And when we start talking about what it is that you're supposed to do in life, we'll ask kids these questions like, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And then sometimes we as adults, we impatient. We don't let them finish. We don't let them answer. We'll say, like, do what you love. Figure out what you love and do that. And love is cool, but in the context of genius, I'm going to say save love for marriage. When it comes to your passion, it's actually the exact opposite end of the spectrum from love. Passion revolves around what you hate. So this is a little different way of thinking. I read this book by a dude named Mike Murdoch one time called The Assignment. He was like, if you want to figure out what you've been put on this planet to do, figure out what it is that you hate. And most of us don't got to figure that out. We know, right? You ask somebody, when I ask kids what they hate, they get real talkative, right? And I have to redirect them like, look, don't tell me like her, like, don't give me a name, don't do that. But tell me what it is about her that gets on your nerves that you hate. And some people are uncomfortable with that word hate, but we really got to get to that place, because the hate comes from trauma, really. Yes. So what is it that you experienced early on in life that made you feel like a fish out of water, that you was like, oh, I don't like that circumstance. I don't like being in that type of environment. I don't like being put in that type of situation because there's something that traumatized me. And as we get older, we may deal with that trauma to a certain degree, but when we see it active and hurting other people, then we'll be like, oh, I hate that. I know what that feels like to have that, to be marginalized. I know what that feels like to be thought less of than what I feel like I have on the inside of me. And I see it impacting somebody else, and I hate that. And what may begin to happen is when you see it happen often enough, you may be like, man, somebody should do something about that. And you may be like, when you get around your friends, you're like, don't let Tarnell see that. He'll go off. Like, oh, he done seen it. And now you're talking about it. And you're like, somebody should do something. And the truth of the matter is, if you keep saying or asking, won't somebody do something about this? The person that should be doing it is actually you.
Yep. So my thing was, be the change you want to see.
Yeah.
If everybody's complaining that, hey, kids don't have this information, okay, cool. How do we fix that? Or I always didn't want to be in a situation too that if I'm walking around with this almanac of information, okay, am I just going to take it with me to the next place after I leave this earth?
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, I'm up there with it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I could have been passing that out, but while I was here. So it's utilize the time that you have correctly, because just like passion and purpose, there's a reason why I was supplied with the information. Am I
Exactly.
supposed to hold on to it? It's not fair, especially in a situation like you just said, where people that look like us don't have all the information, don't have it. Why am I hoarding it? Pass it out. And yeah, you can make money from stuff. Okay, cool. But at the same time, I don't want to charge for it because you're going to be put in spaces just because of your genius and you being able to articulate that stuff correctly.
Man, you hitting it.
They love you for that stuff, man. It's just kind of like, okay, you show up. And here's a good one, real short. With my family, we're in Mississippi back in May.
Mm-hmm.
And we having a conversation just about sports. But once you actually hit what I call is tier 2 or tier 3, you can just see people lock into what you're saying because it's like, okay, now we're in a whole nother realm, and I don't know what he's talking about, but then eventually it's gonna make sense.
Yeah.
And it's like you catch that attention, and that's what I wanted to do because all of the questions that I get, majority of my time in my DMs, are from young athletes that don't understand this process. So if I'm gonna get all the messages, I'm not utilizing their messages, but what I'm doing is, if that's gonna be a question that you got, okay, you got any friends with the same question? Yeah. Why don't y'all all DM me so we can host a space so we can talk about it?
Exactly. And so now the dissemination of the information, that this almanac's worth of information that you have, it does no good until you begin to share it, right? And that's what real genius does. That real genius first self-affirms and then looks around and says, who else can I affirm though with this information though? Who else can I impact that now they become, contributors to society? And it's like it becomes even like a tidal wave. It becomes like this butterfly effect when your genius impacts somebody else and then activates that. That's why it's one of the reasons why I started writing books, because I was like, it's a lot of people out here who have a book on the inside of them, but these authors that are out there are so far removed from them that they're like, I can't do what they do. But I'm like, look, you can touch me, you can talk to me. I can tell you, I can show you how I went about this process. I can help you bring your book to market. I'm not just hoarding all the secrets. Like, I don't know how I published the book. You know how we do sometimes. Like, I don't know how I did it. I just pieced it together. Yes, you do. Like, stop playing around. You know how you did it.
Right.
Share the information, dude. Like, let somebody else be. Let share the light a bit. You don't got to take it all, right?
And let somebody else be great.
Yeah, exactly. Let me be great, right? Let somebody else do it. So this thing came back to me. I think I know what quote it is that your coach might have said about this elephant, because once you begin to tap into your passion, you will address giants. Because when you have this thing motivating you to move forward, you won't care what you go up against. You won't care how big the system is, how big, whatever it is that you're like, you know what, somebody should do something about that. You'll be like, you know what, even if I got to chip away at it a little bit at a time, I don't care. Because as long as I'm moving forward in it, as long as I'm addressing it, it doesn't matter how big of an impact I have, I'm going to keep at it. I'm not going to be discouraged by failures. I mean, failure is just a future, it's a, what's it called? There's an acronym for fail. And it's the first attempt at learning, or it's the first attempt at doing anything, right? And as long as you learn from it, it's not a failure. But here's where the elephant comes in. When you have your passion, like I said, you'll be pitted up against giants. And like, my wife asked me this question one time. She was like, how do you eat an elephant? It's like one piece at a time, one bite at a time, right? Yep. And so this big, massive thing that's in front of you, you just keep chipping away at it. Like, you know what though? I don't feel like it's moving, but that doesn't matter because I know that I have something to do to move this needle to the right a little bit more than it was when I first got here.
Correct.
And so that's the thing that drives you. That's the thing that begins to define your element, right? So my personal question to you, Tarnell, is like, what is it that you hate?
What I hate is people that utilize this system to gain all but not help enough. Because it's just kind of like, okay, as a kid, when you're coming through what I'm attempting to share information on, you got a short amount of time. Can't get that time back. So because you can't get that time back, you end up getting marginalized. Yep. Well, it's really hard to move forward when you're marginalized against people or or marginalized by the people, I should say, that are set up to help you. Because it's like you end up being an unfinished product.
Yeah.
And an unfinished product can't move on to the next level, but see, you don't know you're unfinished. And see, what that does is, my thing is, if something sets you back, it sets you back 3 steps. It sets you back initially. Second step is you need to analyze, and the third step is, now I need to start this again.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a sense, now in my mind, that means you lost a year. You might end up losing a year, but now you need a year to fix it. So then once you fix it, you're still at a loss, because now you need to get back and show that you're something, so that way you can actually get to where you want to get to.
Yeah. So the people that you're defining that propagate these systems, right? They're supposed that the systems are built to help others, but they're propagating it in this broken state because, you know, in essence, the thing that you hate, the thing that we hate in this world are things that are broken, systems that are broken, that aren't servicing the way they're supposed to. And some people get on the inside of this system and they accept the status quo. And they're like, yeah, this status quo is benefiting me, so I'm just going to let it, I'm going to push it along, even though I know it's flawed, right? And we're going to get to a very specific system in a minute. But the trail of people that is leaving behind, that has to bother somebody. It might not bother the person that's cool with the status quo, but the person that's not cool with the status quo is going to be like, somebody should do something about that. I should do something about that, right? So I have a really firm example for you, and I feel us getting closer to what it is that you do by you telling me what it is that you hate. So I took this message to some kids in an elementary school in Bartlett one time, right? And the principal asked me to come to the school because she was like, look, I got these 10 little boys that somebody just needs to give them a message and encourage them. They were 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders all in the same class, right? They were on IEPs. So off the top, you know that something's not right. That marginalization is happening. 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders shouldn't be in one class together all day because there's different learning levels. But because of IEPs, these 10 little boys, and most of them were minorities, were in this class all day, right? So I come in and I've been workshopping this idea of genius. And I'm like, yo, first and foremost, I want you all to know that you're geniuses. And these dudes laughed me to scorn. They was like, this guy, I think you in the wrong class, champ. Like you talking to me? They were so used to receiving negative reinforcements that when somebody came with an affirmation, they were like, don't do that to me. Don't say that to me. They were offended. Some of them were actually mad. They was like, I'm not a genius, man. Don't say that to me. But then it was like, started roasting one another. They were more comfortable with roasting one another and more comfortable with accepting, hey, I got ADD, I got ADHD, all these negative labels, than to have somebody tell them, hey, look, you have a genius in you, because that means now you're responsible and accountable to something, right? So I said, all right, you didn't respond to whether that question, that's cool. When I got to this hate question, these little boys, these 10 little boys that could never agree on anything, they all told me universally the same thing. They hated the same system that was marginalizing them. And what do you think that system was? What do you think they said?
The fact that they're in the same class.
Yeah, the thing that's putting them in the same class is school.
School, yeah.
They was like, we hate school, Mr. Key. And then they looked at me like, now what? Because they just knew they had derailed my whole presentation, right? Because, you know, who's going to sit there and try to build something off of, I hate school? But I was like, you know what? I'm glad you said that, because let me tell you something. And I began to tell them, I was like, look, you all learn differently than everybody else in the school. That doesn't mean that you're less than, it just means you learn different. I said, in fact, there are 8 different ways to learn, 8 different learning styles, but at most schools only really teach from 3. If you're not a verbal learner, if you're not a visual learner, or if you're not a logic learner, then you're going to feel like a fish out of water. You're like, I don't understand the information that you're giving me that I'm supposed to be learning and processing. I'm not learning and processing it right because it's not being spoken in the language and the learning style that they have. So it makes them feel like, oh, I don't belong here. And who wants to constantly return to a place where you feel like you don't belong? Eventually, you're gonna be like, I hate this. If you would have talked to this fish and be like, what you hate about your environment? I hate this tree, man. I keep trying to climb this tree and I'm failing every time I try. I hate whoever keeps telling me I'm supposed to climb this tree. Like this doesn't feel right. And these kids, they had this same, like, this didn't feel right to them, but they couldn't articulate it. I said, hey, look, you're probably a kinesthetic learner, which means you got to move to process information. But every time you move, you're told, sit down, be still, right? You might be an exploratory or expeditionary learner, which means you got to put your hands on stuff to understand. But when you put your hands on stuff, what's told, hey, keep your hands to yourself, stop that. Your learning style is being suppressed. And so, yeah, you hate this place. But I said, look, if instead of taking what you hate and running away from the school system, you then put that in as gas in your tank and ran towards the school system, like went and got an education and then got that education through the filter of your learning style. Now, when you come back to school, turn your learning style into a teaching style. Basically, what I told them was, each of you is a future educator.
Yep.
And they were like, oh, snap. Like, what you just say? I'm like, yeah, you're a teacher. You're a teacher who has a specific style that when you become that teacher and you teach from a kinesthetic point of view, you're going to reach other kinesthetic learners. And now they're not going to feel like I don't belong here.
Right.
But until we empower the young people who are being marginalized, the system stays broken. Because they're the solution. They're the future.
Yep.
But they're being told that they don't fit. So let me just pause for a second. I feel like I've been talking for a while. Let me hear your thoughts.
No, you're good. You're good. So on that, exactly. My thing is, leave this place better than you found it. Because if you leave it as you found it, more people, and we're just going to tear it apart worse. It's already, headed that way, and that'll just be what it is because, we got, 7 billion people out here running around. So there are going to be things that break. There are going to be things that are not right. There are going to be systems that are completely eradicated. But if everybody just has a conscious effort of leave one thing better than you found it, then that's going to be one thing that is going to be less on that burden sheet of things that we need to take care of.
Yeah.
Because somebody that we taught will be handling it. And just like you said, I mean, that's a Tupac quote too. You just want to spark the brain to be able to do something. Not necessarily saying that he got to go do it, but hey, you know what? I could go do that. When you're talking to the young boys, well, wait a minute, we could do that. I was like, yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
Even in them roasting each other, their roasting session. Well, I know how to get him. I know how to get him. You guys just taught each other something right there, but you didn't realize your relation to it is stronger than you actually know.
Right.
You teach somebody something every day. You teach your teacher how to handle you, which is the reason why you ended up in that position anyway, going to speak to them. She knew how to handle them based on what they were doing. And they didn't even realize that. So it's more everyday situation that people forget that in this 365 or 366, as far as a leap year situation, we're teaching somebody that we come across every day about us, but we don't internalize it and we don't view it that way.
Right. And we're learning about ourselves. I think back to Talib Kweli, all right? When Talib Kweli came out, he had a song where he was like, yeah, people were telling me I don't like your voice. I don't like your choice of beats. I don't like a myriad of things about you, but he didn't let that deter him because he was like, I have a voice though. And I know that there's an audience for me. And so eventually he found his audience, which you were saying earlier. And now he has a following, but he didn't let the naysayers deter him. I mean, even Albert Einstein had naysayers. His teachers told his parents, like, yeah, you might want to make sure he work with his hands because he's not processing information the way we need him to in class, because he was a different type of thinker. So even the person who most people associate genius to at one point was on the outside, on the outskirts of things, like, yeah, you don't fit in here. But he didn't let that deter him. Even when he got in college, the teachers was like, he was a visual thinker. Like he was imagining what it would look like to ride a sunbeam from the sun to the earth. And that's how he came up with the theory of relativity. But that's not how his teachers were teaching. And so they was like, you're not getting this. Like, you need to get out of my class. And imagine that has stopped him. Right. Like there is the way that each of us processes information, the way that we process whatever traumatizes us, informs us so that then we can then inform somebody else. I mean, you mentioned something earlier and it triggered me to this thought that I'm about to share with you. I'll be back in Elgin like tomorrow, right? And I'm gonna be going to Elgin. What high school did you go to?
Milwaukee area tech at first, and then I finished my senior year at James Madison in Milwaukee.
Okay. So you didn't go to school here at all, but you work with youth now that are from, Larkin, Elgin, things like that, I'm assuming.
Yep.
All right. So I'll be at Elgin High School tomorrow, right? I've been doing this message about genius for a decade with Elgin High School. And what I will always tell them is, I was like, you know what? When you tap into what it is that your purpose to do, you'll do it for free and you won't care, because it's all about affecting change. And for a decade, Tarnell, I was going to these classes, talking to them about genius. Now, a decade later, because like you said, people recognize this dude know what he's talking about, though. He gets to the second and third tier, and he's saying stuff that we haven't processed before. And people and light bulbs are going off. Now, Tarnell, I'm getting to the point where they're like, we need to get you on a contract, though. But that wasn't my motivator. And that's the thing, like, when we start getting into genius, the motivation isn't money anymore. That will come in time. But when you begin to just hone in on what your craft is and what it is that you're designed to do and purpose to do, like you will do it the minute somebody gives you an opportunity. And it won't matter whether it's one person, 10 people, 20, 30, 50, whatever. But that's how change started. Start small. Talib Kweli started with a small group. I guess you and I in that same group. I think I'm one of his original fans, right? And then it just grew, right? But he didn't get discouraged by the start. And so again, it's this whole thing of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Yep. So now that we have gotten into passion and understanding that, the next logical question is, okay, I've identified what it is that I hate, and I've identified that it's something that's broken in the world. Well, how do I fix it though?
Yep.
Now that gets us to the next component, because when you see something that's broken around your house, what you need a tool to fix it. So talent is your tool to address and fix what it is that's broken in this world that you hate.
For sure.
Right? So what's your talent?
So my talent is, and I had to really go back and think about this. My entire life, going back to elementary school, we used to do shows. Like every school does shows. So we had some teachers, and they kind of got together and they thought about how to put together said show. But they organized it, but us as kids, we ran it. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, from an early age, probably 4th, 5th grade, I was an MC. So I'm standing there with the microphone saying, hey, this is what's going on, this is this. So I had to go back and all the way to that point to think about some things about, okay, you was doing this way back yonder. You got distracted.
Yeah.
Now, that's one thing. The other component to that is, I had a cousin, and years ago, she sent me a webcam. And I'm just kind of like, okay. She was like, I think you should be speaking. I'm like, all right, I don't know what to speak about. So it's like I've been getting these hints about what I should be speaking about and what my larger purpose is. Because I love coaching, but coaching is actually what gave me the information to be able to pass. So you never know like what situation is going to put you where, so that way you can actually convey what you learned and convey it correctly. Because there are some times that you grab and abuse stuff because you just move too quickly. Mm-hmm. So going all the way back to those two situations set up essentially the way I move and how to do it now. But where I had my block in my mind is because I didn't go all the way back to that elementary school situation. Yeah. All of those are building blocks. And for me to, not have one in that equation, that's what was throwing me off. Even when I was asking questions, it didn't feel right. And for me, I'm a feels person. If it doesn't feel right, can't rock with it. Yeah. Because that's my internal gut, like, yeah, nah. And we saying nah, because we just don't want you to, roll with something that's not beneficial for you, or more or less for the bigger situation that you're trying to get out there as a message to the world. So that's more or less how that ended up coming up for me.
It's kind of cool, man, because oftentimes before we learn how important it is to self-affirm, other people will see something in us that we don't see. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think you said there was a cousin that was like, you need to be speaking here, take this webcam, do something with that. Right. So you're like, oh, okay. And now a seed has been planted. Right. And it's good that seed got planted because it leads you to where you are today. And even as you were talking about, you started coaching, but you realized that Coaching was just giving you your sea legs, so to speak, to be able to get to the next level and be like, okay, I managed to do that. But what if I apply what I learned coaching to my passion though? And then how would that, develop? Because I worked in financial aid at a community college and at a private school for many years where I had to do presentations on financial aid and literacy and all this other type of stuff. But that gave me the ability to know that, oh, I'm a speaker though. And so what if I turn this tool now, this talent that I have towards a thing that I'm really passionate about? What would happen if I did that? And then the genius began to develop, right? So what is it that you have, what is it that you do now that takes your talent and applies it to your passion so that you're operating in your genius? Because that's, in essence, that's what your purpose in life is to figure out what your talent is and realize that it's a tool to be applied to your passion, which then unlocks your genius. So what are you doing now?
So what I'm doing now is I have something called Parks to Pros. We're on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter. It's actually Parks to Pros Pod. And we added the pod because eventually we'll start to do some live stuff. So Parks to Pros Pod, what it essentially is a network of coaches, administrators, trainers, and people just involved with athletics, both on the men's side and women's side, various sports, but we all have the same problem. And what that is athletes that are ready to compete when they show up to the college situation.
Okay.
It is not necessarily the athletic part of it. It's everything else. So it's like we're trying to fix people with broken parts to their whole. Are they whole people? Sure. But we're trying to fix those broken parts so that way we can make them more efficient. So that way, whether it's the athletic portion or whether it's the school portion, they get out of the deal what they want to get out of it. And then, more or less, they're not sent home after a semester.
Yeah. That's powerful,
so
man.
That's what we're doing. That's more or less what we're doing. My DMs are always open. You can just hit me and we can have a powwow about how things can go. But I wanted to do that just because I know a ton of coaches. And just kind of like, okay, we all got the same problem. How we all got the same problem?
Yeah, yeah.
All of us are uber in what we do. So it's just kind of like, this shouldn't be happening, And it was just kind of like, as I spoke to more and more people, I'm like, okay, now, like you said earlier, and what we were speaking about, the trauma part of it was I got mad. I'm like, and to make this even funnier, I got one cousin. He just loves to make me angry in athletic situations because he knew that that's how I focus.
Okay.
And they're just kind of like, I hate you, but I love you, man. And he asked me when I originally said to him, he's like, you get mad yet? I'm like, I'm gonna pull up on you. Did I get mad yet? Yes, I got mad over it. That's why we're here. He's like, man, you're gonna be good at this. And he just left it alone and hasn't said anything to me since. But he knew my triggers.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's and he innately knew that was gonna, once you got into that place, that you were gonna have some change. I want to put this out here because this is an observation that I made about a month and a half ago. When I talk about these different learning styles, one of the learning styles being a kinesthetic learner, I believe that many of the top level successful athletes, or the ones who are even getting to that level, are kinesthetic learners. Because think about it, you're processing information on the fly as you're out in the field. And if you're geared towards that type of learning style, that's why you're successful at sports. And we have to, that's so powerful. When it hit me, I was watching one of my neighbors just playing football in this little little league or whatever, and it just hit me like everybody on this field is a kinesthetic learner. And I was like, that's so powerful. That's so powerful to know that about yourself, because then you can begin to advocate for yourself in the classroom, right? And if there's more teachers who recognize that even they're kinesthetic learners and they have students who are kinesthetic learners, then they put them in situations where they can be more successful and thrive and not short circuit when they're trying to get to this next level. Because as an athlete, most people have to be student athletes first, right? And so what you're doing is giving them the opportunity and affording the opportunity to see what is it that's short circuiting and helping them fix it, or helping the coaches understand and be able to see it and advocate for it and then serve it.
Yeah, right.
So that's pretty dope, man, that you have this organization, this entity, because I mean, the networking is important. The thing about passion is not that your passion is that unique. It feels unique to you at first, but when you come into a network of people who all have the same trauma, who have the same thing that drives them, now your individual change can begin to join together with other people. And their talents may be different from yours, but it doesn't matter because you're moving this needle together to address a thing that you all see as a problem.
Right, right.
And that's where, now it becomes this movement, right? I even hear for you that this has the potential. What is the word, Tarnell? It's what is it? Jay-Z is in sports now. He's doing some things. He doesn't he have a sports agency?
It's Rock Nation. I forget the other part of it, but it's definitely Rock Nation.
Yeah, Rock Nation. So I see you getting into agency. I don't know if you've had this idea, but I see you getting into sports agency where you're able to represent athletes on a complete level, though, not just off the court or wherever their field of play is, but helping them be successful and whole, as you were saying, overall. And not being, it's good that you have this network already because you don't feel like, okay, well, to make this thing work, I need to be able to do this, but I don't know how to do it. See, genius is as much about knowing what your strengths are as knowing your weaknesses, because geniuses can't do everything. I'm sorry.
Correct.
Kanye West is a genius in music, but he shouldn't be making clothes. His clothes are trash. I'm sorry. I don't know what people see. You know how we go. If you put a high price tag on something, we'll get it just because it has a high price tag on it. And I almost feel like he's making a joke to us, like, watch, I'm gonna make the ugliest shoes ever, but I'm gonna make them expensive and watch how many people buy them. But anyways, I'm getting off topic.
No, you're not getting off. So you bring that up. Have you ever seen the Pelesi experiment?
Nah.
So the Pelesi experiment is actually Payless. So 4 years ago, Payless set up a fake store and brought shoes out that they used to have that look like Balenciaga and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people were in there paying $500, $600, $700. Now they let them keep the shoes. They gave them back their money.
Okay.
But the people were sitting there on camera like, yeah, these are so innovative, and I just love the way they look, and all of my friends are gonna go wow when I show up, and it's like, yeah, these are from Payless, and they're like, huh?
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
I will send it to you. It's hilarious.
Please do. But just so we come back though. So the point that I was making was your genius doesn't mean that you can do everything well yourself. When you realize, hey, look, I'm good at this, but I hate this. You hate the same thing that I hate, but your talent is different. Now we begin to complement one another. Like one of my guys once said, hey, look, I go off of zeros and nines. The thing that I do really well, my genius, is my 9. I never rate myself at a 10 because then I get complacent. There's always room to improve and learn. But my zeros, though, I'm comfortable with that because somebody else is going to come along and be like, your 0 is my 9. And now we can begin to move and do something together that we couldn't do individually. And that's what I see. Right. That's what I see you developing with Parks to Pros pod. So I'm glad to see it. Like I said, the minute that you hit me up, I'm like, I got to get you on the show because I recognize what you're doing. I want to give, before I kind of close this out, I want to give this example about what real genius looks like in the sports arena, right?
Okay.
King James, LeBron James is a genius.
For sure.
I don't even like LeBron James though. And the genius that I see in him is not what he does on the basketball court. The basketball court is where his talent is. But here's when I look at him from the perspective of this genius equation, I can guess what the thing is that he hates by what I saw him do a couple of years ago. I would guess that he hated his upbringing in poverty. I would guess that he hated having to go to a private school to further his education and hone his talent because the public school system that he was a part of was garbage. It didn't have the resources, it didn't have the teachers, it didn't have the books, it didn't have everything that the students needed to thrive. So he had to go to private school. How do I know that this is what his passion likely is? Because this brother, when he got his platform, when he got his money, he didn't just focus on, I'm gonna get myself a house, I'm gonna get my mama a couple cars. He was like, I'm going back to Akron, Ohio, and I'm going to build a school that is top level in everything. Nothing missing, nothing broken, top of the line schools, top of the line computers, best teachers. And he didn't make it a private school, he made it a public school.
Yep.
And I believe it was from the trauma that he experienced coming up in that public school system that failed him. That's his genius. That's the mark that he leaves on the world that impacts people in a way that he couldn't have been impacted when he was a child.
Mm-hmm.
That's brilliant to me. And I want to see more people be able to do that and function in that type of high level, tier 2, tier 3 type of functionality. And I see you going in that direction, brother.
Yep. I definitely want to see more people, just like you said, do that, because it's not that we can't. It's just sometimes, to be honest, we get distracted.
Yes.
And it takes something else to be like, you know what, I'm mad again. And you hear that, you know, I mean, that's a mainstream thing. Like, so who ruffled your feathers today? Who ticked you off? It's one of those. It could even be a one-day thing that pushes you into something.
True.
But it does come back. It does so definitely circle back to that talent. Like, I have no. Our lovely people at Epic will tell you, I have no problem making a complete fool of myself on them sidelines if it's going to be to the betterment of the group winning a game or them being better as people. If they're going to be better as people, y'all going to be better in these games. And what's furthermore, the two, as they coincide and go together, you're going to be better adults too.
Yeah.
And I like getting those phone calls when they are adults, like, hey, can you come to this? Sure, where are you? You know, I need to book it and make sure I got time. But if you invite me to it because I'm somebody you still revere, yeah, definitely, I'm gonna pull up. I don't care how far it is. And It's just because we have one of those, we're tied together for the rest of this time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we went and did some great things together. So people need to utilize that talent, hone that talent, and not be afraid of what the world is going to say about it.
Yeah, man.
Because the world is going to make their comments. You got people out there that we used to say something growing up that like, yeah, they're in your way, right? Yeah, they were made to be in the way. You got to figure out how to climb over it. Climb over it, go around, tunnel under. One of those three will supply you with the situation. Or the fourth one is the biggest one, especially now that, you know, we're all professionals, we're all adults, and we have to display ourselves a certain type of way. You can beat a lot of those odds just by talking to whatever that object is in front of you. Because even if you talk to the object and the object still doesn't want to move, at least you know the playing field of which you're dealing with. So that way, if you decide to take one of those other three routes, it's going to be a lot more effective and it's not going to take you as long.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. See, this was good, man. I appreciate your time coming on the show and your contribution to what you're doing in the Elgin area, the Fox Valley region, which is going to broaden because this is going to start. I mean, it sounds like you're from Wisconsin originally. So, I mean, I see this just expanding beyond even the Fox Valley region, what you're doing. There's no limits now with you know, everything being virtual the way it is. So, you know, I want to thank you again for coming on. Thank you for doing what you do. And look, man, Tarnell, it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
For sure. I appreciate you. And I might just have to pull up on you tomorrow.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at Inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.